In the last session, we have discussed about interprocess communication, its characteristics and all. Now we can see the external data representation which is required in distributed systems for communication between two different processes. So we can see what's the requirement for external data representation and what are the different approaches for representing data externally. So usually the information stored in programs will be represented as data structures, right? Like it can be some objects or it can be arrays or lists or something. That is the data structure property will be always maintained or preserved in a program. Whereas when we transmit the data over a channel, that is sending some data from one process to another, the corresponding property won't be there. It will be treated as a sequence of bytes. That is, we have to convert or flatten a data structure into a sequence of bytes before transmission, and at the receiving side we have to rebuild the original structure. So a lot of issues or challenges are here. So the message may contain lot of data items. Individual data items may be there in the same message, and different computers may use different formats for storing the same data. That's one of the problem. That is, sender and receiver may use different format for the same data structure. So when we flatten at the sender side and when we try to rebuild at the receiver side, it should be ensured that the correct data structure or correct property of the data structure is restored back. For example, floating point numbers will be represented in different format in different architectures. And also for ordering of integers like big endian and little endian representation will be there. So sender and receiver may use different formats. Another issue is that the set of codes used to represent characters like can be ASCII in one system and Unicode in another system. So all these types of dissimilarities should be addressed when we transmit a message from one process to another in a distributed system. So external data representation is an agreed standard for the representation of data structures and primitive values. The two approaches are there for a communication of data between two different machines. That is, either they can use this agreed external representation. So two conversions will be necessary. That is, sender side, the sender format data should be converted into this external format, and that will be communicated over the channel or the network. And at the receiver side, this external format data will be, or the message will be converted back into receiver's format. So two conversions are necessary, and if the two computers are known to be the same type, the conversion to external format can be omitted. And the second approach is that use sender's format and convert to receiver format at the receiver side. So some indication should be there. So the values are transmitted in the sender's format together with an indication of format used, and the recipient convert the values according to this indication. Or the reverse process also can be done. That is, the sender will convert into receiver's format and will be transmitted over the network. So let us discuss about the first method, that is using an external data representation. So two different procedures are there, marshalling and unmarshalling. So marshalling is at the sending side, and it's a process of taking a collection of data items and assembling them into a form suitable for transmission in a message. And at the receiver side, the reverse will happen, that is unmarshalling. Unmarshalling is the process of deassembling them on arrival to produce an equivalent collection of data items at the destination. This marshalling consists of the translation of structured data items and primitive values into an external data representation. And similarly, unmarshalling consists of the generation of primitive values from their external data representation. Three different alternatives are there for this external data representation and marshalling. You can see all these three. First one is Corba, second one is Java's object serialization, and third one is using XML. So first one is Corba, that is Common Object Request Broker Architecture, which is an external data representation for structured and primitive data types, and it can be used for representing arguments and results in remote method invocation, and mainly used by many programming languages. And second one is Java's object serialization, which is specifically for Java. And it's a method of flattening of any single object or tree of objects at the sending side, and at the receiving side it will be restructured or deserialization will be done at the receiving side to restore the original data structures of objects. And the third one is XML or extended markup language. It was earlier it was used only for textual data like web documents and all, and later it was used for any type of data format, like it is used in web services and all, to make a common format for representing something. So next is we can see the CORBA standard in some more detail. CORBA's common data representation. It is defined by the CORBA 2.0 standard. Almost all the data types are covered in this representation. So any type we can represent using this CORBA's external format. So all the data, primitive data types like short, long, character, anything can be represented. And the composite types also can be represented using this CORBA standard. So we can see how the composite data types will be represented. So this is how it is represented externally using this CDR. If it is a sequence, the length of the sequence will be first specified, followed by the elements in the order. That will be the representation. And if it is a string, the length of the string will be the first element, then followed by the characters in order. So length always will be in unsigned long format. Array elements in order. No length is specified because the array length is always fixed. Like that, any composite data type can be represented in this CORBA CDR format. Here is an example of how to represent a constructed data type using this CORBA CDR format. For example, we have a structure person with values Smith, London, 1984. So our constructed data type contains three fields like string. First field is string, second field is also a string, and third one is an unsigned long integer. This figure shows how it is actually represented using the CDR form. So the bytes, the sequence of bytes are arranged as 4 bytes in each row. Okay. So the representation of each string has two fields. One is the length of the string, which is an unsigned long, and the second is the sequence of characters written in order. So here we have the string length 5 for Smith is the string we have to represent. 5 is the length, then the characters. So for simplicity, we assume that each characters occupy 1 byte. So the first 4 characters will be occupied in the second row, and the next character, the remaining character, that is H, will be occupied in the next row. So here in the case of variable length data, the remaining remaining fields will be padded with zeros so that it has a standard form. And in this case, checksum computation and also will be easier in case of a fixed length form. Like that, the second string is also represented. The length of the string is 6, and the remaining 2 rows for representing the characters in order. And finally, we have the year, which is an unsigned long integer, and unsigned long integers usually occupies 4 bytes. Now the second method of external data representation, that is Java object serialization. So any object or primitive data types may be passed as arguments or results in remote method invocation, right? So there is the requirement that these objects and the primitive data types have to be converted into some external data format. So we can see how it is done using this Java object serialization. In the previous example, we have a struct person defined by CORBA standard. Now we can see how it is converted into a Java class. Okay, this is how it is actually declared. Public class person implements serializable, then the components, then the class definition, public class, string a name, etc. and the constructor, followed by the method for accessing the instance variable. So here we can see that the class person implements the interface serializable. So the serializable interface allows its instances to be serialized. If you want to serialize an object, that is, if you want to flatten an object, it should the corresponding class should implement the interface serializable. So Java object serialization involves 2 different procedures: serialization at the sender end and deserialization at the receiver end. Serialization means flattening objects into a serial form for storing on disk or transmitting in a message. whereas deserialization refers to restoring the state of objects from the serialized form. So at the receiver side, when we deserialize it or restore in the original state, there won't be any prior knowledge about the types of objects and all. So to get it properly restored, some information about the class of each object and some metadata should be there with the serialized data, serialized form. Then only it can restore back correctly. Now the Java objects can contain references to other objects. So when an object is serialized, all the objects that references are also will be serialized so that it can ensure that when the object is reconstructed, all of its references can be fulfilled at the destination. Actually, these references are serialized using handles or serialized as handles. So handle is a reference to an object within the serialized form. So definitely each object will be written only one and handle will be written in subsequent occurrences. Now we can see an example here. An object P of class person with value Smith, London and 1934 is getting serialized. To serialize an object, the class information will be written out first. The class name, the version number, and each class will be given a handle. H0 is the handle given for the person class. That will be written first, and after that the information about the corresponding instance will be written, like number of instance variable and name and type of each instance variable will be there, and finally the values of the corresponding instance variables. So if the instance variables belongs to new classes, then their class information must be also written out, followed by the types and names of their instance variables, etc. This is actually a recursive procedure. So this can be reduced by using the handles. Just for example, place belongs to a new class. So instead of writing the information again, we will use the handle h1 instead of the values of that instance variable here.